I was in EAP, and my second year, I started doing research like in the summer and in the school year for different professors. I did like a variety of things. I learned how to use Stata, which was really important. Then get an internship at Resources for the Future, which is a think tank in DC where you're using econometrics to answer questions. And in this case, the questions are about energy and environment topics. And I worked on deriving a value for willingness to pay for forests. So the Forest Service wanted an estimate of how much the average citizen is willing to pay for forests so that they could try to get some money from Congress to fund like forest management. In my last year, I did the honors thesis class, so it's like 4 units for both semesters, and you pair up with a professor. So like choose your favorite professor who like you think is going to be good to support you in your research, and you're basically like writing your own research paper. So like I used my research paper in applying to all the jobs I applied to, and it was like really important because otherwise I didn't really have anything that was like, this is my work, I know how to do econometrics, see here for the evidence. And so the question that I tried to answer a few different questions about electricity demand in the US and its relation to temperature. So I was curious to know how people react to extreme weather events and how people react when, let's say, like it's really hot unexpectedly. So in my senior year, I applied to a bunch of research assistant positions. They're also called Pre-Doctoral Fellowships. They're 1 to 2 year, usually, programs with professors at different universities. So I did 2 years working for a professor there. It's sort of like you're doing graduate level research, but you're not a student. So you're getting paid like full salary. And in some programs, you're also considered a student. So you can take courses, which is really nice. And one of the big projects we worked on was comparing Medicare care to the care you'd receive in a Veterans Affairs hospital. So in the VA, which is the Veterans Affairs, they have like a centralized system. So it's like closer to what you'd think of in a European country. And then Medicare is a federally funded, but it's like a private medical system. And so we have like a sample population who can go to either of those hospitals, and we try to do some pseudo randomization to send them to the hospitals. And then we can see, like people who went to Medicare did much worse than people who went to the VA or vice versa. And so pretty much like all the econometrics tools that you learned, like apply to creating a model there. Most of my colleagues are going to go on to do PhD programs.
An EAP major and an environmental science major. My honors thesis, it's using econometric tools to analyze groundwater in California. And so we expect that as climate change gets more severe, that water resource in California will be more stressed, and this will exacerbate the already existing groundwater exhaustion, especially since when there are kind of naturally drought periods, groundwater gets used much more heavily. So my postgrad plans are to go to law school. So I took the LSAT last summer, so the summer between my junior and senior year. Basically, it was kind of a hectic summer. I was studying for the LSAT, and I took it on July 15th. So after school on July 15th, I was studying for the LSAT and working part-time at the district attorney's office in San Francisco. And then literally the day I took the LSAT, I left with my friends to go and hike the John Muir Trail in the Sierras. So I kind of went from intense studying in my little zone to just out in the mountains, which was awesome. I'm going to go to Harvard for law school, which is I'm pretty excited about. Yeah, so I want to do environmental law broadly, and there's obviously a lot of nuances to that and different pathways to pursue. I think I've had an interest in water. Obviously, my thesis is on water in California, so I would be interested in looking at water laws in California and groundwater laws in California. But really, energy law or as long as I'm doing something related to sustainability and the environment, I would be really happy. So that's kind of my goal, and I'm sure after 3 years of law school, I'll have a more defined answer.
So yeah, my thesis is about, it's called What's in My Backyard? Estimating the Value of Clean Air. And so what I'm focused on is local air pollution. Okay. Yeah, local air pollution still has big impacts today, even though there have been improvements over the last 40 years. In particular, people of color are more likely to be exposed to air pollution, more likely to live near the factories and power plants that produce these toxic pollutants. And so what I'm interested more broadly in is how aware are people of the negative effects of this harmful air pollution? Like how well are people making optimal decisions based on the air pollution? Or do we need some kind of intervention to help people understand how the air pollution will affect the rest of their lives? And so kind of the first step to answering that question is to estimate, or how much do people value cleaner air? And it's something that's been asked before. In particular, there's this one paper by Janet Curry, Michael Greenstone, and a few professors at Berkeley, Reed Walker and Lucas Davis, that tries to do just this, estimate the willingness to pay for cleaner air by looking at factories that close and open. And so when a factory opens, there's an increase in air pollution, and we can see, does that have an effect on home prices near these plants? And so I'm going to build off that design and do something similar. I'm going to focus on coal power plants, which produce a lot of toxic emissions, and going to look at the coal power plants that converted to natural gas, which has way fewer toxic emissions. And so there's a decline in harmful air pollution. And I want to see, does that show up in the home price data? In particular, I'm going to focus on Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, because there are these power plants, coal power plants that converted, and they were right downtown. And so there are lots of people living near them. Here is Madison, and you can see that the power plant is just kind of steps away from the state capitol. And then I just can kind of document that there is actually a reduction in air pollution when these plants convert. So this is just a simple regression of like mercury emissions on a set of like firm fixed effects, and then an indicator for if we're in a period after the firm converted, and we can see that the mercury gets reduced by 90 pounds, which is significant. It's almost all of the mercury that's in these coal power plants. And so we see this improvement in air quality, and we want to know if that shows up in home prices. But a problem is that there's lots of things that affect home prices, and we want to isolate just this one thing that changes. And so that's why we're going to use these conversions. In particular, we're going to compare home prices really close to the plant to home prices that are just a bit farther away. The homes within a mile of the plant are treated in that they were exposed to harmful air pollution before the plant converted. Homes a little bit farther away weren't as exposed to the air pollution. And so when the plant converts, they don't actually see a change in the toxic air pollution going into their homes. And so they were essentially untreated. And so if we compare home prices within a mile radius to home prices a little bit farther away, we can figure out, well, how much are these people willing to pay for the cleaner air, and does it show up in the home prices? We might be concerned that there are different, like there's an omitted variable that's affecting the home prices in these areas. In particular, we're concerned if there's a variable that affects the within mile radius, those neighborhoods, if it affects those neighborhoods differently than the neighborhoods that are just a little bit farther away. And so this shows that kind of if we can classify neighborhoods before the recession as being like having high home prices and low home prices. So I'm just breaking them into quintiles, and then we can plot the home prices over time, and we can see a big decline in low valued neighborhoods, but we see less of a decline in the high valued neighborhoods, that top bar. And so if we think that there are more low value neighborhoods within that mile radius than neighborhoods a bit farther away, then we might pick up on, we might not get the causal effect that we're trying to identify. In particular, we're going to try and control for the quality of neighborhood and then interact that fixed effect for the quality of neighborhood with a time trend and allow the recession to have a differentiated effect on the homes on different quality neighborhoods. If that makes sense. But yeah, I just wanted to say to all of you that I think writing a thesis is an incredible way to learn about economics in the world, and you get to apply the tools that you're learning. So if you're interested in doing kind of research assistant after college, the NBR has a really great resource where they post a ton of different job opportunities that you can take.
Okay, so litigation consulting. I don't know how many of you have any experience with litigation consulting or know what it is, know anything about it. But it's my career. It's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, and I graduated from Berkeley. I didn't know what it was when I went into school studying economics, and so I figured I'll keep passing that along because it's a very interesting field. It's a lot of fun, and not that many people know about it. So what we do. So this is how things work for us. We're litigation consultants. So what we do is we provide consulting services to attorneys and legal firms with regards to economic issues. Essentially, if you guys have ever seen like Law and Order, that's the example that I always go to, where they put the guy on the stand and he's like an expert witness, and they're like, oh, how do you know that this person fired the gun or whatever? And he goes through gunshot residues and everything like that. We essentially do the same thing, but we do it for economics and economic issues. And so having a degree like the one that you guys are getting is going to be super helpful in that regard. And it's a very adversarial process. It's because the other side also has experts, right? So you're going back and forth with the other experts team, filing reports and making your case for why the numbers and the facts say, what your side is saying. And the other side is doing the same thing. And so that's part of what keeps it interesting. The other part is that you're in all different sorts of industries and you're working on all different sorts of cases. So these are just some of the examples of cases that we've worked on. We'll do price fixing cases, no poaching agreements. So that's a big thing that's going on right now. I've done some analysis on that, looking at like a company that talks to other companies and does, we're really paying a lot for our workers. Wouldn't it be nice if we just sort of agreed to not hire workers from each other? Well, that has sort of the knock-on effect of pushing wages down for all the workers, because now they can't go and apply for jobs at those other places that maybe they're really well suited to work for. In terms of sort of the day-to-day, a lot of data analysis, a lot of data work, looking at data sets that are provided by companies, defendants, or plaintiffs, being able to sort of construct graphs and make arguments about what that data says and communicate that well with people who aren't economists. So you have to be able to sort of synthesize what you're seeing and make it understandable. So skills you need, programming is a really big one. Stata, SAS, Excel, Python, sort of sometimes. R is becoming more popular, I think, now. Yeah, so lots of programming. Time management, you have to know how to manage your time well. You have to know how to communicate because you work in teams and you work with experts who maybe aren't always there. And so you have to be able to communicate stuff to them. And you have to be able to think critically and try and figure out, what does this data that the opposing counsel gave you actually mean? And is all of the data even there? Trying to figure out stuff like that. In terms of getting started, so this is sort of like the hierarchy of positions. most of you guys would be applying for intern or analyst positions. And then sort of you want to think about maybe getting a PhD or a master's degree if this is something that you want to do long term. To apply, companies will have job fairs. So there's other litigation consulting companies besides just mine. But some of them I think are recruiting at Berkeley, and so you guys can look online. Start early with that though. I would say a lot of them have sort of information sessions at the beginning of the semester. So try and get in and look at those and look at related firms to sort of figure out what you want to do, and make sure you're asking sort of what they focus on and what they specialize in and what kind of work they actually do, because different firms will have different sort of specializations.
So brief overview of me. So I was in your guys' position. I was doing a degree in EAP at Berkeley, and I was in Betty Sadule's econometrics class, and I found that I really enjoyed everything that I learned. I could see the kind of like applications, the real life applications to everything. So that kind of really motivated me to continue to try and see if research was for me and if I wanted to kind of explore that further. And I luckily was able to kind of apply. There's a whole website called Spur. You can go on there and see all these research opportunities within the College of Natural Resources. That was a very helpful thing for me to kind of be a part of. I'm really glad that it exists. And one of her projects that looked at air quality in Olympics and all that sort of stuff with George Judge. And that kind of really made me interested in research post-grad. So after I graduated Berkeley, I then went on to help out on some research about the bottle bill in California. And I helped Sophia and Peter Burke on some of their research for that for a year. So I kind of was responsible for kind of going to recycling centers, surveying people, seeing where they're getting their materials from to kind of understand the potential recycling fraud that was happening in California. There was a big issue there. After that, after kind of the bottle bill research, I was able to go to Rhode Island to help Justine Hastings at her policy lab. Went through the application process of kind of doing a data task where you kind of you estimate, you kind of run a regret, they send you a task and they're like, how would you, what specification would you run? And then you kind of come up with a research report of your own to study a question. I think my question was studying the elasticity of gas, which is something you all should probably, I think, know how to estimate by now. And so then I went through that process. I got interviewed by Justine and her team, and eventually I landed the position, and then I packed up all my stuff and moved over to Providence, where I've been able to kind of work a lot with some very impressive data. Ripple has been able to essentially pool a lot of data from different various government agencies and able to study such long-term impacts like the college enrollment, essentially follow a baby from birth all the way up to college enrollment, because we've been able to pool data from the Department of Health, the department. It's wild, and it's all de-identified, so we don't know who's who in the data, and so then that gives us the ability to kind of study and kind of return to questions like this birth weight paper, where we've kind of looked at just underneath the threshold what kind of impacts on the academics that they would be, whether or not they go to college more often. We are able to look at kind of truancies as well, so like whether or not a child is acting up in schools. So that gives us a lot of power and also a lot of interesting results that hopefully lead to more cost-effective and kind of silver bullet policies that then lead to improved outcomes for people in Rhode Island. So I kind of work with R, I work with Stata, and I work in Python sometimes. So you guys have the tools that you need to essentially write a working paper. And that's really cool, I think, to be able to be in that position and to have that knowledge. So that's kind of my history of how I got to where I am. Through my experiences with Ripple and with the bottle bill research, it's kind of continued to validate my desire to do research. It's continued to kind of assure me that I am on the right path. So I think just continuing to explore and figure out, just trial and error really is what I've been doing. And it's fine if you don't have everything figured out, because, you know, that's what trial and error is all about. You just kind of chug along and see what works and what doesn't, and then just not be too hard on yourself when things don't go a certain way, because there's more information that comes from that as well. There's always a silver lining. So that's kind of my recommendation for people. Just continue to just, like, I don't know, just try and be open-minded and see where your interests take you.
So my name is Scott Kaplan. And a little about me, I graduated in 2014 in environmental science and environmental econ. And I took a year off and then continued as a PhD student here in the Department of ARE. My research interests are in industrial organization, consumer behavior. So I got very interested in the soda tax and how consumers responded to that, obviously. And I also have interest in agricultural and environmental economics. And more recently, I would say the economics of entertainment, which is super fun. I do want to take a little bit of time to give you some sort of reflection that I've had since being in your shoes not too long ago, a little bit longer than I'd like to admit, but not too long ago. And so, especially, I think I can provide useful perspective on graduate school and research. So if you're thinking about doing a PhD in some sort of economics related field, you know, this includes things like public policy or business. Health economics has its own program in certain places. You really need to be prepared from a technical standpoint. And so Math 53 and 54, right, that's multivariable calculus and linear algebra differential equations are super, I mean, they're essential for applying to these programs. And then Math 104, which is the theory-based real analysis class, is a huge plus. I think these days it's becoming more of a requirement than even when I applied. So it's important to have that class to show that you're able to kind of keep up, especially in the first year curriculum for the econ PhD. Then, you know, the more stats and econometrics training you can get beforehand, the better. So stats 134, this class, and even graduate level econometrics, if you're really interested in graduate school, are going to be super helpful to get you to really give you an idea of how economics, how people think about economics empirically, which is, I think the field is really moving towards an empirical focus, like many fields, because of the access to data. And so that, you know, the more, again, experience you have with stats, I think the better you'll understand kind of the methods that people are using in our space. The most important thing I think you can have that will tell you whether or not a PhD is potentially right for you is to have research experience. You know, I can only say that as an undergrad, I was lucky to really become involved in the research process at an early stage. And I think the more you can do that before you graduate, or even after you graduate, before going to graduate school, the better you'll sort of understand what that landscape looks like. And I think, so I just encourage you to try to, if you're really interested in pursuing a path like this, try to find research opportunities and talk to people, right? Talk to faculty about what it's like to be a graduate student. Talk to graduate students because you want to have as much information as you can before you take such a big step. And another more strategic thing I think is I would advise taking the GRE at the end of, but probably shortly after undergrad. I think that your brain is sort of still in school mode, and I think that can be helpful when taking a sort of standardized test, and you're sort of in already like a place where you've learned how to study effectively. And I think that, you know, doing this, the GRE doesn't take more than a few months of prep, I would say, but I think doing it shortly after undergrad can be helpful, and sort of being in that zone still. And then another very important thing that I think gets lost in the shuffle sometimes is take some time off for yourself, have experiences in life, work, travel, other things. Another point of advice that I think I would always tell undergrads is be proactive and confident. I think you can differentiate yourself from other people the more that you're seeking things out. Don't expect people to come to you with opportunities. Go and seek them out. Go find them, talk to people. There's a really, really great network of people at Berkeley that think about this a lot. So I think that you're in a great place for this type of situation. And even after you leave Berkeley, when you graduate, you're still going to have access to the resources, the alumni network here. So take advantage of that. And remember that you're getting a degree from the best university in the world. And then I think the last thing that I'll say that has really, propelled me in many ways is finding mentors that are personally invested in you. I think I have other mentors, in the research and academic space, but also outside that space. And I think finding those people early and sort of really, again, being proactive about maintaining a relationship with them is extremely important, because there's a lot of doors that can be opened from knowing people that are invested in you and that care about you professionally and personally. So.
Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs for California Energy. Yeah, I finished CNR undergrad in 2005. Went back to Berkeley and got my master's from the policy school and left in 2007. I worked for the state of California for a decade afterwards, from 2008 until 2018. What was called the Public Utilities Commission. They're the state's primary energy regulator for the investor-owned utilities, so think PG&E, and just did a whole bunch of stuff, both utility safety, utility regulatory rate cases, emerging policy trends, just all over the place. And then after a decade, I got itchy feet and I moved over to Environmental Defense Fund about 1.5 years ago. So the work that I do is to figure out how do we ensure all of California has access to a affordable, clean, and reliable electric grid. So I do stuff from the regulatory legislative side, but then I will help conduct, and I have an analytics team that reports to me, but I'll have to know enough of the econometrics to say, all right, here's the stuff that I'm going to need and why, frame the problem, and then sometimes they'll give me the raw data, and then I'll just do the analysis myself because I know what I want, and then I have them double check me. And you do a fair amount of both when you're in a policy job, is that you get to be the jack of all trades. And so you have to understand the data and be able to see what the story the data is telling you to be able to be effective as an advocate. Go Bears.